All right, so it appears that the board is present, the superintendent is present, and all of our guests and attendees are logged in. I will then call this school board public meeting to order. Good afternoon, everyone. As it is our custom, we prior to beginning our official meeting, we call upon members of our communities or the board to recite for us an invocation. I believe that today our volunteer is Mr. Ricky Booth.
Do you have me, Chairman Soto?
Yes, and Mr. Booth, if you would please lead us in the invocation, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. If you please bow with me. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you here tonight, always asking for your guidance and your direction as we make decisions to lead the school district of Osceola County. Tonight, Lord, over the past couple weeks, what I've been reminded of is that love will always trump hate and good will always overcome evil. And Lord, I know that we need you in our lives now more than ever. It is in your name that I pray tonight. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. Tonight, reciting the pledge, our volunteer is Mr. Clarence Thacker. Sir?
If you could rise with me for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Thacker. Mr. Whiteside, if you will, please.
Sure. The mission statement of the Osceola County School District is inspiring all learners to reach their highest potential as responsible, productive citizens.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Whiteside. And so we will begin our official school board meeting with positive comments from the board. I will go ahead and call upon by district order. Ms. Castillo, do you have any positive comments you want to share?
I don't have anything specific, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Castillo. I will go ahead and demur as well. District 3, Mr. Weisire.
No, sir, I'm fine this evening.
Well, Mr. Thacker.
I'm fine, thank you.
And Mr. Booth.
I'm good.
Very well. So let's commence and go to the first item in our board packet. Is that appointments and transfer? Correct.
Yes, Chairman Soto, thank you very much. I do have 2 appointments tonight to bring to the board for your consideration. We will start with our Director of Exceptional Student Education. As I shared with the board earlier, our current director, Linda Schroeder-King, will be retiring this fall. In order to make sure that we have a smooth transition in such a key position at the beginning of school, she has agreed to work through August and September, but we're going to bring on a new director as of July 1 to shadow with her and to help make sure we're guiding the school year and getting things off to a smooth start. And I am pleased to recommend Miss Hillary DeLuca. Hillary has been an instructor at the Developmental Disabilities Institute in Smithtown, New York, a behavioral specialist at Dinjon Middle, Dean of Students at Dinjon Middle, Assistant Principal at Dinjon Middle, Narcoossee Elementary, Kissimmee Elementary, and also Neptune Middle. And she's also currently serving as the principal of Eastlake Elementary School, where she's been since 2017. She received her bachelor's degree in psychology from the State University of New York at Binghamton and a master's degree in educational leadership from Stetson University. She brings a true passion for meeting the needs of all children, particularly our exceptional student education learners, and I am confident she's going to be a great asset to the district and service to our families and staff.
Motion to approve.
So
Second.
I believe that there was a motion to approve by Mr. Tim Weisire, a second, I believe, by Mr. Booth. I'm going to give a pause for hands, for comments or questions.
Mr. Soto, I have some.
Very well. The floor is yours, Mr. Booth.
Yeah, just want to say I'm very excited for Ms. DeLuca to get started. Thank you to Ms. Schroeder-King for all her years of dedication to the Osceola County School District. We appreciate her. This is a tough position. This is a position that has become more and more challenging over the years. So I look forward to all the good work that Hillary's going to do.
Those are some excellent comments, Mr. Booth. Anyone else? Mr. Weissier?
No, mine are in agreement with Mr. Booth.
Okay, sorry, I don't know why you came up on my feed here. Very well, so with that said, I'll call the question for a vote. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Registered 5 votes, therefore the vote passes 5-0. Congratulations. Dr. Peace, your second.
Chairman Soto, our second appointment, because you all know that I love to have our school administrative teams full as we start to begin the summer, so that both teachers and students and families know who's going to be their leader, because it's such an important role. I'm bringing forward tonight the replacement for Ms. DeLuca. So for the principal of Eastlake Elementary School, I am proud to recommend Mr. William Hennessy. Mr. Hennessy has been a teacher at Myra Barnes Intermediate School, 24, a teacher at Ventura Elementary School, the math science coach at Ventura, an elementary resource teacher for the Osceola School District, and has been serving since 2016 as the assistant principal at Reedy Creek. He received his bachelor's degree in history from City University of New York and his master's degree in educational leadership from Stetson University. And he is super excited about this opportunity. I am confident he will do a great job in working with Ms. Noble, the assistant principal there at Eastlake, to continue some of the great things that Ms. DeLuca has already started.
Excellent, Dr. Pace. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Thacker
Second.
and a second by Ms. Castillo. I'll just pause briefly to give the board members any opportunities for to address. Mr. Weissier, I see your hand. You have the floor.
Thank you. I just want to compliment, as always, Superintendent, but your selection and your choice. I know that Mr. Hennessy will do an absolutely amazing job. I have great confidence in him. I've tremendously enjoyed working with him at Reedy Creek Elementary, and we'll look forward to continue working with him in his new position, new post, and I know that he'll do an exceptional job for all the students at that school. So congratulations to him, and thank you to you.
Thank you, Mr. Weissier, for those good comments. Pausing, I see none. Therefore, I'll call the question. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please state aye. Aye. And I did register 5 aye votes. Therefore, the vote passes 5-0. Congratulations, Mr. Hennessy. And
Thank you, Chairman Soto.
yeah, I believe that takes us to public comments. Dr. Pace, I'll leave this to you.
Yes, sir. We have received 6 public comments this afternoon related to the OXA graduation. With the board's permission, we will forward all of these to you so that you can review them electronically and make sure that they are a part of our record. And I will read one because they're all addressing the same issue. And then while we typically do not respond to public comment, Chairman Soto, with your permission, I would like to address the concern. The
Please
first
proceed.
comment says, yes, I speak on behalf of many parents for the graduating class of OCSA. We were notified that graduation guests would be required to be in a separate room watching graduation via live stream. While we understood that this may be necessary for traditional SDOC high schools, we don't believe it's necessary for OCSA. The PAC holds almost 2,000 people and there are only 150 graduates. We understand only allowing 2 viewers per student, but we want the school or district to reconsider the separate streaming room. OCEA is not a tradition school. It has a fraction of the students, and every single student has to work their butts off to get into OCEA. We believe they have the right to have their own plan separate from that of the other larger non-magnet public high schools in SDOC. I am pleased to share with both the parents and the staff at SDOC, as well as the students, and also at the other graduation ceremonies that are going to be held in the auditorium at OCEA. After working with the Department of Health and also with our staff, we are going to be able to have both parents and students in the auditorium. They will not be spaced as widely apart, so it will be imperative that everyone remembers to wear their masks. We, as you all know, board members, I will be providing masks for all of our graduates and say the class of 2020. We want to make sure that we keep people safe, but we will be able to be in the same room, and all of our graduates will get 4 tickets instead of 2. So I believe those concerns have been addressed, and again, we'll forward all of them to you electronically and make sure they're part of the permanent record. And that's all I have, Chairman Soto.
Very well, thank you. And I believe that will conclude this portion of the meeting for public comments. And at this point, we will recess for a public hearing. Mr. John Boyd will present.
Good evening, board members.
This evening, I'm bringing to you the proposed revisions to school board rules that I shared at our board workshop at the last meeting, with additions to certain rules that I'll read the summaries of into the record. And at the close of my reading of the summary, I request an opportunity for public comment as it was advertised as a public hearing. And then after that, request that action be taken on these changes that are proposed. That being said, the first change is to Rule 2.221. It's a proposed new rule that was actually approved by the board at an emergency meeting on March 26th, 2020. The title of this rule is Emergency Policy Relating to School Board Meetings. It establishes requirements due to the public health emergency posed by the spread of COVID-19 to hold virtual or telephonic meetings as set forth in the Florida Department of Education's additional guidance for the 2019-20 school year that was issued upon March 17th, 2020. And for reasons allowed by Executive Order number 2069, FLDOE Directive, Attorney General Opinion, or Florida law. The second proposed new school board rule is 3.14, suicide prevention. It implements requirements within section 1012.583, continuing education and in-service training for youth suicide awareness and prevention, Florida statutes. The next series of school board rule changes are all the same change. I will list them and read them in a series. I will let you know the summary of each of these rules has as a change to update references for the No Child Left Behind Act to the Every Student Succeeds Act, and adding the appropriate citations to each of these rules. There are 6. 2.261, Family and School Partnership for Student Achievement. 5.14, Homeless Students. 5.16, Educational Stability for Children in Foster Care. 5.321, Prohibiting Bullying and Harassment. 5.711, Parental Access to Information. And lastly, 6.144, Educational Paraprofessionals and Assistants. The next proposed school board rule change is to 5.70, Student Records. It revises paragraph 1 to clarify that procedures shall include provisions of the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, requirements relating to the surveying of students, the collecting of information from students for marketing purposes, and certain non-emergency medical examinations. The next change is School Board Rule 5.80, Athletics. This is the rule that covers quite a few changes that are brought forth in a pending state legislation, but already considered Florida High School Athletic Association's rules. These include adding paragraph 9 to clarify that beginning June 1st, 2021, per Florida High School Athletics Association rules, a school employee or volunteer with current training in cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, and the use of an automatic external defibrillator, AED, must be present at each athletic event during and outside of the school year, including practices, workouts, and conditioning sessions. And it revises paragraph 10 to clarify that the AED must be in a clearly marked and publicized location for each athletic contest, practice, workout, and conditioning session, including those conducted outside of the school year. And lastly, we're adding paragraph 11 to clarify that beginning July 1st, 2020, per Florida High School Athletics Association rules, and also that is a differing effective date that's actually in the state statute from whence this rule comes. In order to better protect student athletes participating in athletics during hot weather and avoid preventable injury or death, each member school on a year-round basis shall meet requirements regarding the identification, prevention, and response to exertional heat stress or illness, including but not limited to appropriate training and effective administration of hydration and cooling zones. The next series of proposed changes all affect the Code of Student Conduct. First, These changes revise the policy document to comply with recent changes in state law and to provide consistency with district precedent and current practice. There is an update to the title page to reflect the 2021 school year. There's a revision that changes the definition of stealing/larceny/theft to reflect less than $750 and more than $750 in accordance with state law. There's a deletion of the definition of unsafe act for the purposes of clarity. There's a revision to the standards of conduct for riding a school bus to clarify that a school bus is school board property. The Code of Student Conduct applies on a school bus, and that parents must receive permission prior to boarding a school bus. It adds the term transportation designee as a contact to whom concerns about student conduct on the school bus must be or may be reported, There's a clarification that a student's parents have the responsibility for control, direction, and conduct of the student during all times other than when the bus is present at the bus stop. There is a replacement of the phrase buckle seatbelt with utilize the student restraint system. There's a clarification that throwing items from the school bus is classified as a felony. There's a clarification that littering, throwing, or propelling items is prohibited whether inside or outside the school bus. There's a clarification that profanity, obscene language, offensive gestures, or offensive materials of any nature are prohibited whether on the school bus or at the school bus stop. It clarifies the use of devices associated with tobacco/nicotine are prohibited. There's a clarification that students on school buses may be videotaped to ensure safety and security. There's an addition of Boy Scouts and other patriotic youth groups to the school district's non-discrimination statement section in order to reflect current federal law. And there's an update, or there are several updates to the definitions of terms to comply with recent changes in state law. Specifically, Section 1006.07, District School Board Rules relating to student discipline and school safety, Florida statutes, State Board of Education Rule 6A-1.0017, School Environmental Safety Incident Reporting, SESR, Florida Administrative Code. Lastly, there are updates to the matrix of infractions and consequences to comply with recent changes in state law in the same places I just cited for the previous change, and to reflect the above revisions as appropriate. School board members, at this time, I'll pause to provide the opportunity for the public comment since this is a public hearing, if there are any. If there are none, I would ask for your questions at this time, or if there are none, your action on these changes that are proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Before I call on school board members, I'm going to just pause. And I guess if there's going to be any kind of public input, they will go through the board secretary or Dr. Pace. Am I correct?
Correct, sir. And we have no public comment at this time.
Dr. Pace. Then I will, and I'm calling the hand that I saw up. That is Mr. Booth. Mr. Booth, you have the floor.
I don't know why my hand was up. I apologize.
Any interest from any board members to speak? I'll just make a few comments. Thank you very much, Mr. Boyd. Explanation. And
thank you, Chairman.
So let's vote, I guess. Board, is there any motion to approve these recommended changes and adoption of those?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Very well. Do I have a second? The board chairman makes a second on the motion to approve. I'll hold off to see any hands for further comments or questions. Approved by in favor, please state aye.
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 All right. I heard 5. If I'm wrong, let me know. So, therefore, passes with a vote of 5-0.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. And with that, we will go ahead and adjourn this rulemaking public hearing and reconvene our school board regular hearing. Takes us to agenda modifications. I'll go down by district and then to the superintendent. District 1, any modifications?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, there's none by District 2, 3.
No, sir.
Thank you. District 4
No, sir.
and District 5.
No, sir.
Superintendent, are there any modifications?
Mr. Chair, I can't hear Dr. Pace.
All right, Dr. Pace, would you please repeat?
Deb.
I can't hear him.
He's working on it.
Okay.
Hear me now?
Barely.
Okay, Mr. Board Chair, under new business, we need for the board to select a member for the advocacy committee, formerly the legislative committee for FSBA. We must submit that name by July the 1st, and that is all.
We'll add that to the end of the board, the new business at the end of the agenda. And I wouldn't mind you reminding us when we get to that point again. All right, so see no further modifications. Motion to approve the consent agenda, adding that new business at the end.
Moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
So we have a motion to approve by Mr. Whiteside, a second by Mr. Thacker. Board, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
And I think I've registered Ricky's yes. Therefore, the vote passes 5-0. Brings us to items. There is the audit advisory committee meeting notes for the board to review and consider. But that takes no presentation. Therefore, we're on number 14 of the regular agenda. This is for the approval, 14.01, for the approval of the agreement for the education liaison reimbursement contract.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And so there is a motion to approve item 14.01 by Mr. Weissire, seconded by Ms. Castillo. I'll pause for hands. Seeing that there is no hands up for comments or question, I'll put the question to order. All those in favor of 14.01 approval, please state aye.
Aye.
I did register 5 aye votes. Therefore, 14.01 is approved for a vote of 5-0. Brings us to item 50.01 of the regular business and finance. Approval of the agreement between the Foundation for Osceola Education.
Chairman, I'll make a motion to deny the request as presented.
Very well. There's a motion to deny 2.01. Is there a second? I believe your motion will not carry without a second, Mr. Weissman.
Mr. Chair, I don't have a second. I would just like to ask Mr. Weissire to expand on his request, please.
Thank you. I am looking for hands on these items, just so the rest of the board knows so that I can.
Apologize.
Okay, so Ms. Castillo, you have the floor for any comments or questions. And I believe the question was put to Mr. Weissire. Mr. Weissire, do you want to discuss this issue?
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
So a few things that I think the board will want to bear in mind. First of all, let me start off by saying, of course, like all of you and everyone in the district, I value the partnership that we have with the Education Foundation. And so nothing I'm saying is in any way to undermine the partnership and the role that they play with us. However, you've got to understand I'm approaching this from a very pure perspective of what the role and intent of education foundations were established to be and what purpose they're supposed to fulfill. Much like I know many of you discuss when you're thinking about charter contracts, you say, do they meet the original spirit of intent? And so when you think about an education foundation, they were established to provide additional support and resources to bridge a gap between the private sector and the public sector to support public education within a respective community. And if my memory is correct, 64 to 67 counties in the state of Florida have education foundations, and we're certainly fortunate to have ours. If you go back a number of years ago, there was an agreement made that the school board of Osceola County would be the beneficiary of dollars coming in through tonnage and trash collection from the landfill. That had taken place for a number of years. That money was always provided to the school board and the school district of Osceola County. Then rewind about 10, maybe 11 years ago or so, there was some controversy within the board and within the with regard to the board and the role of superintendent, and a decision was made to instead move that money from coming to the school district to going to the education foundation. And then there was some subsequent things that happened after that as well. And I'm sharing this with you because I think this historical perspective would really help you. Fast forward then to about 3 years ago, this board entertained a conversation about beginning to roll some of those dollars back and truing back up the process that was originally set in place, which is that these dollars would come to the school district. And so we set in motion a course of action to begin to work down that scale. And I'm using round numbers when I use these numbers, but $220,000 originally, and then the next year, only 180 we go to the foundation, next year 140. And I don't know the exact numbers, but that's about the framework that we're working with. The agreement that's before us tonight is to agree that of the dollars raised or allocated through this funding source, that 120,000 of it annually go to the foundation in perpetuity, and that the school district would receive the balance thereof, provided that the collections are in excess of $220,000. Which, if it is just 220,000, if we're getting 100 and the foundation's getting 120, then they're obviously still getting more than we are. The comments that I made a number of years ago still stand today, which is I think that the best course of action is for us to continue to allow this funding source to come to the school district to be utilized for programs, products, and services that we would offer to our students and to our community. And that we would continue to expand a partnership and support with the foundation whereby they can help raise dollars from the private sector to support the programs and services that they're providing to help the work that we're trying to accomplish collectively, namely in the area of providing scholarships to our students. So why did I make my motion, and where is it that I stand? I believe that it would be appropriate for us to continue to transition these dollars to, over time, continue to come back to the school board. I am not implying that it needs to happen overnight. I recognize that we're in the midst of a pandemic and there are challenges that exist on the fundraising side, and continuing to provide value to the foundation and the relationship is of importance to me, and I believe it is to all of us, including our staff. However, if we approve this agreement, it says that it would be 120,000 to the foundation in perpetuity, and I just can't in good conscience agree to that. I would rather it be something that for this budget cycle would be 120,000, but then we would continue to work that down over time. I'm okay with us not taking action on the item this evening and allowing time for the superintendent or the board chair or any board member to have a conversation, including myself, to have a conversation with the foundation to figure out what that plan might look like. But I do stand that I believe it's appropriate that these dollars begin to come back to the school board more and more and more over time, as opposed to what's proposed to us today. I'll end by saying that I think that what's been put before us was put before us in good faith, and I don't have any issue with it whatsoever. And I know that it comes from a spirit of collaboration and partnership, and I value that. I just fundamentally think that it should be reversed and revert back to the school board. So I yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Weissayer. Let me go to Ms. Castillo and then to Mr. Thacker, since she did post the inquiry. Ms. Castillo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is more of a question for Dr. Pace. Dr. Pace, a lot of the funds that we receive are typically with some kind of allocation requirement. Are these funds, because I don't have the historical information, I really just have the contract in front of me. I'm sorry, the proposal in front of me, which I've read already. So looking at this in and of itself, I wouldn't necessarily have an issue with it. So just as a point of historical reference, do these dollars have any kind of allocation requirements? Must be spent in a specific way?
No, Ms. Castillo, those dollars were meant to enrich our programming for kids. So for example, this is one of the ways, source of funds for our education awards annually. We certainly seek community partnerships and sponsorships for that, but this also goes toward that. This goes toward national competitions for students who might need travel money. We usually try to have some dollars for that. The foundation helps to support typically our Juilliard Start program that even though this year it had to be virtual, did continue. And there are those are the types of things that these funds can do, mostly to enrich the kinds of things that we do for our students.
I understand. And with regards to the, I guess the suggestion that Mr. Weishire made, which the way I understand it, and please forgive me if I misunderstood, is to modify it over time. Clearly that requires a new contract. If that is where the board is seeking to land on this particular item. So I guess I would either ask you or Mr. Weishire if you had any, and if you could clarify, and I apologize if I missed it. Did you mean to suggest that we completely, I don't want to say that we completely revert the $220,000 to the school district during this year? Or what I may have heard is that your suggestion is to scale it down over time?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Castillo. Yes, that is what I'm proposing, which is exactly what we've been doing over the last number of years. It was, and again, I'm just using numbers from memory here, but it was 220,000 to the foundation, and then we moved it down to, and again, 180, but I'm just picking these numbers here, 180, 140, and maybe now 120. The math could be anywhere in there, but it's close. So what I would propose is that we look to do a continuation of that, 120 this year, because I recognize the foundation needs the dollars as they stand, and they're working through an important budget cycle, and I think it's a sign of good faith. But that instead it would be 120 this year and 80 next year, 40 the next year, and then in the last year, all the money would be coming back to the school board. Something like that, which then gives them time to adjust, adapt, and to continue to identify additional fundraising sources to support their work.
Okay. One more question, and Dr. Pace, I apologize if this seems repetitive. When I asked the original question about how we're allocating the dollars I meant within the district, do you know, especially since you serve on the Education Foundation as well, do you know how they're allocating the dollars for their purposes? Is this for scholarship money that they're using it, or?
Some of this money goes into their scholarship fund. It also supports the Take Stock in Children fund. It supports their Reading Buddy fund, their Bookmark Buddies fund, all the different activities, and also our medical and construction pipelines. A lot of the dollars that for both of those pipelines and for the Juilliard program in particular are where some of these dollars come from.
Understood. Thank you.
For historical purposes, when I became the superintendent, we recognized that there was no formal agreement about these dollars. It had just been kind of word of mouth, history and tradition. And so we felt like we did need to formalize that agreement for the sake of this board and then boards to come. And that's when, based on feedback from the board, we started to kind of scale back to get to a point where it was more half. And that was also when, as a district, we decided to take back the education awards and organize that event ourselves, as opposed to having the foundation do it on our behalf. And that's what most of those dollars that we're doing currently are kind of going toward, those types of programs, that and state of education.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Castillo, can I call on Mr. Thacker and then?
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right, Mr. Thacker, you have the floor.
Mr. Weishire, thank you for the refresher, because this has all come back to me now. I don't know if we need, if you want to amend your motion to send it back and renegotiate the continual waterfall or reduction over time. I would support that. And I guess I like you I was actually trying to get on the second motion. I couldn't get to my mute button fast enough, but so I think we're somewhere better anyway. Send it back and let them come up with a way that works for everybody, because that's an all to nothing, certainly too much of a hit all at one time. But anything into perpetuity is probably not real good either. So, what do you think?
Mr. Chairman, the attorney, could I recommend that you pull it from the agenda, and the superintendent will deal with it, because I was involved in this from the state audit standpoint of making sure there was documentation. We'll go back and I think, unless board members oppose it, and if the goal is to have this phased down, then we will go back and talk, rather than you don't need a motion to disapprove it tonight. You can just take it off and we can deal with it. That's all right with you, Mr. Shaw?
Sure. Chairman, may I?
Actually, Mr. Whiteside, let me chime in, because I really want to give you the last word, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So, I am also aware, and I do have a record of what's been said, and of the roles and the relationships between these organizations. And so I believe that what this board right now inclination is that board members, I would encourage you to speak with the superintendent and the board attorney, the board of the members of the board of the Education Foundation, and see what kind of agreement we could put in. I believe that it serves all the parties to eliminate the vagueness. I think the first attempt of doing that by the superintendent was a good first step, but obviously it did not take care of it completely. So now we have this contract here that really it's not going to be sufficient for what the goals are, what we want the relationship to be stabilized for the long term. And so that's really what I would go into here, is that we resolve ambiguity. Mr. Krupenbacher will help us with an agreement that it's clear to both organizations and all the parties involved, that it's fair, and that we can approve on our next on whether it's the next meeting or several meetings. I wouldn't even want to rush this, to be quite honest with you. So that's where I stand with this. And Mr. Whitesire, you do, and I'll call him Mr. Whitesire, then Mr. Thacker.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with your comments as well as Mr. Thacker's, and I certainly understand and appreciate where our council is on this. I have no problem with it at all. Just to be clear, I did not make a motion to deny it because I wanted to pull the rug out. That was not the intent at all. What I didn't want was a motion to approve it and then have to try to catch up to it on the back end. So my motion was really to try to get ahead of this conversation as opposed to catch up to it tonight. I think I've made clear what my desire truly is, which is a continued partnership and a continued scaling down of this, and working with a process that fulfills what the original intent and design of this money was, which was to be in the possession of the school district to utilize this for our purposes, and what the original intent of what the foundation was, which is to continue the bridge, expand the bridge between the private sector and the work that we do, and they do a great job of that. So I'm perfectly fine with either a motion to postpone until a future date or a motion to table. I will yield to council if you have a particular recommendation. Otherwise, I'm perfectly inclined to make a motion that would accomplish the same.
Very well. And let me call on Mr. Thacker for his comments. Clarence, you have the floor.
I just really had a question, probably for Dr. Pace. Is time of the essence on this because they're working on their budget, or do we have a little bit of time here?
We have a little bit of time. If this is not something that I would try to add to our June 30 meeting, I think that's best reserved primarily for our back to school discussions, but certainly we'll bring it back to the meeting in July.
Excellent. Mr. Whitesire, I'm sorry, Mr. Thacker, anything further on your inquiry?
No, that was it. I was just saying thank you.
Very, thank you. Mr. Weissier, final comments?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to our attorney. He wanted to make a comment regarding my question, and then I'm prepared to make a motion, Chairman.
Mr. Krupenbacher, can you guide us through this?
Yes, I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, if the board is in agreement with this, just pull the item from the meeting tonight, because if you table it, you have the same item still alive. And if you pull it, we can come back with a fresh item at the July meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Krupenbacher. I'll go ahead and pull the item, and with guidance from the board to the district to open it up for discussion and renegotiation for further consideration at a future board meeting, hopefully in July. Would that settle it?
Yes, other than Mr. Chairman, Mr. Weiser needs to, for the record, withdraw the motion he made. I think it's still on the table.
I think his motion died for lack of a second, actually.
That's correct. It did die for lack of a second. So the action is still, so basically the item 15.01 is still pending, and I just pulled it with direction to the district to renegotiate and for the board to get involved and bring us a new agreement, hopefully in July. Is that clear? Suffice?
Perfect.
Thank you. So with that, we'll go on to item 16.
Mr. Chairman.
16.04 would make a motion approving.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, so that was Mr. Booth for a motion to approve 1604 and a second by Mr. Thacker. Am I correct?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Let me take this. This is just a technical issue. Was it that Mr. Booth made a motion to approve 16.04? Is that correct? Dr. Pace?
Yes, that is correct. And you had a second from Mr. Thacker.
Very well. I'll pause for comments. I believe, Mr. Weissier, is that your hand for a comment on this item?
Yes, sir.
The floor, sir.
I want to say thank you to our facilities department regarding item 16.01. Board, as you'll recall, we had quite a bit of discussion regarding the drainage repair project for Poinciana High School and the athletic fields, the football fields particular out there. They did a great job of going out into the marketplace, getting bids and pulling this project back before us. And you'll notice that the dollar amount is substantially lower than what our original thought and costs would be. And so I want to recognize that. I also want to recognize that as facilities continues to look at ensuring that the organizational chart and the work that they're doing internally is in place. You guys know that historically I tend to vote against new position allocations. However, I know ZHA has been doing good work regarding supporting the upcoming transition within the facilities department, and I recognize that, and I recognize that our team in facilities has been doing a lot of work on behalf of the school board to get these renovations and these new construction projects completed. And I had a great conversation with Mr. Clinch regarding where they are, where they're going, and where they need to be to make sure that the staff and the operations on that very important department are in place. And I just wanted to extend my gratitude and approval of all these items support for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weissier. Just pausing here, I see no further comments. Therefore, I'll call the question. We have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Really, I can't hear Mr. Booth.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you, sir. I did register 5 aye votes. The vote passes 5-0, which takes us to.
I'd like to make a motion to approve 17.05 with discussion.
Very well. I did hear a motion to approve 17.05 of Mr. Thacker, second by Ms. Castillo, and Mr. Thacker requesting opportunity to comments. Mr. Thacker, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just want to give credit to the two police departments, City of Kissimmee Police Department and St. Cloud Police Department and our Sheriff's Office for the commitment they have to our safety of our students and our staff and all the work that they do for the district. We are extremely fortunate in Osceola County to have this relationship where we do a cost share. I can tell you that does not exist in a lot of other counties. And when you're 67 out of 67 in per student funding, quite frankly, this would be a huge, huge burden to this district and our students and staff if we did not have this cooperation. And I think the resource officers we have do a great service to our community, a great service to our students, far more than just the safety, which is their primary function, but it's also about bringing the police departments and sheriff's department in close proximity to the kids, where they can get to know some of these people personally and develop a relationship with some of the people that are in law enforcement and build a positive experience with them as opposed to a negative experience. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thacker. Dr. Pace, may I call on Mr. Booth first, even though your hand was up? You have the floor, Mr. Booth.
Yeah, I don't think I could say it much better. Totally agree with Mr. Thacker. Just want to say thank you, Chief Odell, Chief Gauntlet, Sheriff Gibson, the sheriff's departments, and the police departments. Thank you for all their work, and thank you to the Osceola County Commission for supporting what we do. I think it bears repeating. So thank you to our police officers and our sheriff's deputies and for all the work they do within schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. And Dr. Pace, if you please allow me.
Certainly.
I am in complete agreement with my fellow board members. This is a really a community effort when we talk about public education, and there's so many contributions, and of course the contribution to the safety and security of our students that the sheriff's department and the St. Cloud Police and Kissimmee Police are committed to is invaluable. And so I do share with the appreciation of my fellow board members, and I'm very glad, and I really commend you, Dr. Pace, for putting this together. And again, it is something that is just invaluable to this community. Thank you, Dr. Pace.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Soto and members of the board. I will just share again that our relationship with Sheriff Gibson, with Chief Odell, Chief Gauntlet, and their teams is truly invaluable to me as a superintendent, and I think to all of us throughout this community. The open communication, the trust really goes so far. And as Mr. Thacker pointed out, this is so much more than safety, although certainly that is our first priority. It's really about building those positive relationships and helping to build those connections to help keep our whole community even safer. I did want to point out on item 17.04, Chairman Soto, simply for the record, that while it says approval of the 2020-21 district level administrator assignments, that is also our school-based level administrator appointments as well. The attachment is complete. I just wanted to make sure you knew what you were being asked to approve.
Thank you, Dr. Pace. Ms. Castillo, I do see your hand. You have the floor.
Yes, I don't like feeling left out. So I just wanted to go ahead and as well echo the comments that have been made by other board members. I don't know that people understand how important it is to have SROs in our class, in our schools. Is not just about protection, but it's also about being a positive community leader. I had a conversation with a parent from Denjon this past weekend, and basically, they had nothing but good things to say about the SRO that their children was in contact with. So I just think that this is a great program. I work with a lot of officers in some of my different activities that I do throughout the community. And I'm just glad that we are able to have such a positive relationship with our law enforcement.
Thank you. Those are some excellent comments, Ms. Castillo. Just trying to see what other hands are up. I think Mr. Booth wants to speak again. You have the floor, Mr. Booth.
No, as soon as you vote, I was actually, my hand is raised for item 18.01.
You're getting ahead of us here. All right, let me get this moving so that you could have your chance on 18.02. We have a motion to approve 17.05 and a second. Taking no further. Mr. Weiser, do you want to speak on 17.05?
The only thing I'll say is ditto to everything that was said. We're fortunate that the relationships we have, and everyone has covered it exceptionally well.
All right. So you see what you did there, Ms. Castillo? Anyways, we have a motion to approve in a second. Without any further discussion, all those in favor, please state aye.
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 Vote passes 5-0. So that brings us to 18. Mr. Booth, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 18.01. And then I would like some discussion if there is a second, which
I will second it.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Booth and a second by Mr. Thacker. Discussion by Mr. Booth. You have the floor, sir.
I just really want to say thank you to Deseret Land and Cattle, or Citrus and Cattle, excuse me. I have been working on this since my election and before my election to the school board and ever since. And it's been a long struggle just to try to get to this point. But I'm extremely excited that we now have some agricultural land for our Harmony High School agricultural program that we just approved a 12-month teaching position for, and I think this further validates that. But now we have, I think, 260 some odd acres to utilize for the purposes of our agriculture education, and puts us on par with some of the biggest and best agriculture programs in the entire state of Florida, if not the entire nation. So thank you so much to those folks out there.
Well, Mr. Booth, I'll recognize your accomplishment and congratulate you. Mr. Weissier, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chairman. That's what I was going to say. Obviously, I'm grateful to Deseret, but Mr. Booth, I wanted to thank you for your leadership and your passion for this and for bringing this as an opportunity for the board to approve enthusiastically this evening. As you said, this is going to be a great opportunity, and without your leadership on this, it would have not happened. I recognize that and I value that.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in before I call it for a vote? Mr. Booth, you have final words before the vote?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Look, it's for the kids, and I'm certainly excited about the opportunities, and looking forward. I wish it wouldn't have took me 6 years to get it done, but here we are. And so congratulations to the Harmony High School program. And thank you again to Deseret, and thank you, Mr. Weissier, for your kind words.
Excellent. So we have a motion by Mr. Booth and a second by Mr. Thacker. We'll take a vote now. Board, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
I registered 5 aye votes. The vote passed 5-0.
Mr. One more comment, please.
Yes, sir. Floor's yours.
And I meant to say this up front. I know because of Corona and all these things going on, we don't have the Deseret folks in attendance at the meeting and all this. And I know Dr. Pace and I have already talked about this, but we will at some time announcement or something that really recognize out there. So that education staff, we do something out there for these folks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Booth. I didn't quite hear most of that, but I'm pretty sure it was. And see any other hands. So we'll call the vote. All those in favor, please state aye. Oh, we did the vote. We already approved it 5-0. All right. So again, guys, we do intend always to have the video on, but the truth is that it affects the bandwidth, and I can't hear very well. And when I turn off the video, for some reason, my computer works better. Anyways, in case anyone was wondering. Brings us to Mr. Krupenbacher.
Yes, I spoke earlier, members of the board, with the chairman and requested that his permission that we would move tonight's executive closed litigation meeting to after the next board meeting on the 30th. And there'd be 2 closed sessions that night on litigation, one involving the lawsuit in the Osceola Circuit Court of the Sticks versus the school board. And then the second one would involve the SIGNA filing with the Department of Administrative Hearings. The only people per the statute I need to announce that's in the meeting would be the school board members, the superintendent, myself, additionally outside counsel, either via phone or in presence, and the court reporter. At the end of the litigation, the transcribed record would be available to the public. The only items that can be talked about in those sessions are those lawsuits, strategies, and matters related to the lawsuit.
Thank you, Mr. Kupenbacher.
Okay. The second item is we have what's called an IOPA contract, which is for the curriculum for the airframe mechanic program at OHS. We have been able to reach agreement on everything with one exception. And that is they want venue in the event there was a dispute that went to court in Maryland and will not agree to have it in Osceola County. I will not agree to that without board's authorization. We need the contract. The chances of litigation are slim to none. I also think there's an argument if we ever had litigation that state law may preempt the issue because you have to sue a government in its own county. But for the greater good of having this program for students, and there's not an alternative available. We checked into that, everything. I'd ask the board to, unless there's by consent, to simply say it's okay to make the change for that. We have never done this. I've never run into one that we've backed up like this because normally they'll agree to leave it blank if we can't agree. But this particular person in Maryland is just entrenched in the issue, and I'd like your authority to make that change. I would not make that without you. Anybody have an opposed my being able to do that to get this contract done?
Let me, I see several hands up. I want to start with Ms. Castillo first.
Yes, thank you. Can you refresh my memory? Which curriculum item was this?
I know it as the airframe mechanic program for.
That was for OHS?
Yes.
Thank you.
Let me move on to Mr. I could come back to you, by the way, Ms. Castillo. Mr. Thacker, you have the floor.
Frank, why do you think they're so adamant about this? They're adamant. Makes me a little nervous, to be quite honest. That's the only ones we can do this with.
I think in the dialogue that they are afraid to make changes to their form contract, almost to the form of paralysis. And we got them to agree to everything we needed and done, and this was the only issue. Mr. Thacker, I think that they would have a hard time actually enforcing the waiver, because I think I have some arguments, but I don't want to really go into them publicly to counter it. And I don't envision, I looked up, I didn't find any lawsuits involving them in any school districts. I wanted to see if there was any of that out there. So I'm reasonably comfortable that we're okay with this. Again, I will never agree to that. I think it's the board's right to decide that issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thacker. Ms. Castillo, I know that you initiated the discussion. Would you like to make any more comments?
When did we approve this initially?
I'm not aware of this being brought to you. It
hasn't been brought to us as of yet?
No, this is the final thing that I have to lock down to be able to bring it to you and get it on the agenda. And we're not going to bring it to you without having it resolved up front.
This is an important part of the aviation program at OHS. As you know, we finally have gotten qualified instructors and have some continuity in that particular plan that would allow them to actually, start participating in the work at the airport and fix planes, learn how to fix them.
Dr. Pace, do you have any position or any input as to the request from the attorney?
Well, certainly I'm in no position to judge the legal aspect of it, but in some cases like this, we do have to make a business decision. The curriculum itself would be very valuable to the program.
Okay.
Members of the board, so I went so far as to tell curriculum, just tell them we don't have a contract if we can't get it. that didn't work. And then curriculum advised me that this was critical and was the only available option to them. We've pressed hard on it.
Mr. Chairman, my hand's raised when you're ready.
You know what? I was in thought. Please proceed, Mr. Weissire.
Thank you. Mr. Krumbacher, I share Mr. Thacker's concern, to be honest with you, but I am going to, I think I'm going to yield to your guidance on this and ask you, in your 30 plus years, maybe more, I'm not sure, of experience in representing school boards and various government agencies, if I hear you correctly, your advice to us is to proceed and that you feel comfortable and confident that we're not taking on an undue legal liability that we will or a future board will regret, and that the likelihood of there being some type of a lawsuit that we would have to deal with outside of jurisdiction is very unlikely, and this is a very mitigated risk. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment. And without disclosing some cards, I'm not worried about the clause. Yeah, because I know what the Florida cases say. I don't think they know what I know about the statutes, et cetera. So the curriculum has nowhere to go if we don't get this contract.
Sure. So at a deference for your experience in legal counsel, I'm going to say personally that I'm okay with moving forward. I want to be very clear. I am making and this isn't directed at you, Mr. Kruppenbacher, it's directed to the ether. I'm making a one-time exception in this instance, not something that I would typically do, but I would be fine with us moving forward to be able to advance this service to our students at Osceola High School and trust your counsel on this.
Thank you for that, because we have never agreed, and it's bothering me that we're kind of backed up because of this, but to me, you walk away from the contract on this issue if you weren't in the situation we're in.
Okay. Board, I'm fine. I yield back to you.
Very well. I'm just taking a pause to see if there's anything further from any other board members. All right, so Mr. Kruppenbacher, it looks like you have a contract to finalize and bring before the board.
Yes, thank you, members of the board. Finally, we go back to live under the governor's executive orders. Effective July 1, we return to live meetings. It would be my recommendation that we start on June 30th going back to live meetings, because I think it shows this board's been very, very, very big on transparency, and to say we're going to wait that one extra day, I think counters that. A lot of my colleagues are saying the same thing. You know, why would you wait one day? So my recommendation would be we return to the regular meetings on July 30th in terms of them being open to the public, et cetera. June 30th, I'm sorry.
I'm good.
All right.
I'm good.
So.
All right, so I'm just waiting on hands. Mr. Kruppenbacher, I understand that going back to live meetings. I in my position as chairman and the administration of these meetings, I would like us to consider whether or not to make it optional still for anyone that wants to attend through Zoom or Teams through these other methods. What say you to that?
I think that is a perfectly fine thing to do for the board, to say, look, it's optional for you if you're on. No. You can do both because we're doing it right now.
Correct.
Oh, I'm being told that there's a technological problem with trying to run it. A regular meeting combined with, so Mr. Chairman, your idea would work if technologically it could happen, but it can't happen technologically.
We will, however, continue to live stream our board meetings and board workshops. We can, if the board chair wanted to entertain it, we could continue to accept public comment via email or text as well as in person. We can limit the number of people who come in for public comment to, a handful at a time, keeping them perhaps in my conference room. We certainly can take those measures in place, but we have no way to do both the WebEx and our regular live meetings. But we can we'll stream it live with the new technology, but we'll be back to live meetings.
Let me continue to get input from the board. Mr. Booth, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I'm fine with returning to the live meetings. I'd also like to say that if our chairman doesn't come to the meeting, I would suggest that our vice chairman chair the meeting, even if the chairman decides to attend virtually or over the phone or whatnot.
Okay, very well. Mr. Weissier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the executive order from the governor removed the requirement for a physical quorum. And so in truth, we could go back to what the standing order is prior to COVID, which is that you need to have a majority quorum physically present in order to conduct a public school board meeting or workshop. And but at no point has it ever precluded any one board member, or in truth, two board members, from calling in or Skyping in or Zooming in or WebExing, whatever technology you want to reference there. So what I would propose is that we move forward with the live meetings as we always have. And if there is an instance where a board member or two does not want to be in attendance, it would be no different than what we've done in the past, where we would still record, still host, still do everything live in person here from our headquarters, and enable that individual board member to call in if they needed or desired. There's no issue with that. Obviously, we would continue to, as the superintendent pointed out, in my opinion would be the same, is that we would think about how to best mitigate the physical presence of people to ensure that the best practices around physical distancing and good CDC recommendations and guidance is utilized within our facility. But I'm fully in support of us coming back to the fully live meetings, with the exception being somebody being virtual as opposed to the opposite. And that's in line with what law has always been.
Very good. Let me get Ms. Castillo. You have the floor.
Can I just yield to Mr. Thacker? I thought his hand was up before mine. I don't want to take his turn.
Okay, very well. I'll come right back to you. Mr. Thacker, you have the floor.
No, I'm just in agreement with Mr. Weissier. That's been the rule for long before this. If somebody can't be there due to travel or stuck in traffic or whatever, they can dial in. As long as there's a quorum present, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with what we're talking about.
All right. So before I come back to you, Ms. Castillo, it does seem as though we'll have at least 3 board members physically present. So that's pretty much, settles that. We'll be able to do the meeting. Ms. Castillo, it is your turn. You have the floor.
Right. Thank you. I understand what the I guess statute says, but I thought there was an issue with us being able to actually have a board member virtually participate while at the same time we are having a live meeting. Is that correct, Dr. Pace, or can we just have somebody dial in? And is that an issue? I'm just trying to make sure that this is technologically possible. That's bottom line.
In the past, we've had board members potentially call in for workshops, but not necessarily meetings. But I'm going to lead to counsel on that. We do have a phone in here, correct or not? Yes.
Yeah. So
we just can't do it via WebEx and at the same time do live.
They would have to call in. It wouldn't be a WebEx. It wouldn't be a Zoom. It would have to be a call in to whatever number this is.
Correct.
Okay. I guess and that's never been done before, right?
Yes, I have done that on several occasions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've done it for meetings and I've done it for executive sessions when I've been out of town.
Okay.
All right. So, Mr. Booth, I think you forgot to put your hands down, or do you have something else to add?
No, that was it. And I think I just want to make clear, I think, if the chairman is one of the people that is not in attendance, then the vice chairman will actually run the meeting. You certainly wouldn't want the meeting to be run over the phone, and I just want to make that clear.
Well, let me go ahead and address that. I think that's pretty obvious. I mean, the point that I'm trying to make is that I bring up these issues just because you may feel one thing right now and then feel something different. I just wanted to cover the bases. It wasn't, here's some further guidance from your chair, if you don't mind. I see a separation of two things here. Number one is the risk that we take as, sworn, public servants and our duties to the community that, unfortunately will have risk and, however small the possibility, it happened now in 2020. But the other part of it is what risk do we put to our employees and to the public? So that said, I just wanted to make sure we covered the basis because we don't know what the information is going to be by the 30th. And maybe you, Mr. Booth, may be of the opinion that you don't want to appear in public, in person. And now you know how this thing is going to play out. That said, if we're going to have a live meeting, and that's the way that we're going to conduct it, I am fine with that as far as the board is concerned. As I said, this is our risk to take and our sworn duty. It's a little bit different, exposing the public and the employees to risk. So I will go ahead and give a direction to the superintendent and administration to allow for live streaming. There's going to be physical distancing and masking required if we're going to go ahead and allow anyone into the audience of the room. Again, I think that right now that is the prudent course of action, and I think it strikes a very good balance between having things going back to normal and a time when we're not quite sure, but still satisfying that desire that we want to go ahead and take some steps towards that goal. So that's where I stand on this. I think that we can have our board members appear in person. We already know that if you can't, it won't be in a WebEx meeting because we do not have the technology for that. So you will be calling in. If I'm not available to, and Mr. Weisar, he could lead the meeting. That's totally fine. I fully intend to be there in person. Like I said, because it is my risk and my sworn duty to the community to do my job. But as far as everyone else, Dr. Pace, if you can please put together some kind of guidelines and things of how we're going to do so that our public and our employees are not subjected to the same risk as the rest of the board is. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. With the board's permission, I will go ahead and continue to have my staff watch live stream, and they can call in or text me if there's an issue so that we can, as a board and superintendent, still spread ourselves out around the room. That appears to have been working very well.
Very well. All right. So that is, I don't see other hands, so that is settled. We will go ahead and move on to the next thing, and that is the was that on 19.01, Dr. Pace, or do you have anything on?
I don't have anything on 19.01.
All right, so we go into unfinished business. Osceola back to school. I handed it back to Dr. Pace.
Yes, sir. As we've been talking about, we have our back to school meeting with the board on June the 30th. I am meeting tomorrow with the director from the Department of Health, Bianca McCluskey, and then I have meetings scheduled later in the week with our 2 infectious disease specialists from Nemours to kind of review where we stand in terms of what the recommendations would be for our back to school plan. We just got our teacher survey results back later this afternoon, and I've not had a chance to review those, but I will share those with the board, and we've shared our parent and student surveys with you. So as you know, the governor's back to school plan is very aggressive. We have just 2 weeks to put together our plan for the CARES Act, as well as then for the GEAR dollars that could be used for summer programming. We are looking at what we can do to safely but effectively bring students back in during the month of July for some face-to-face instruction, particularly in those risk times, rising kindergarten students, for example, who may not have had a VPK experience or for whom their VPK experience was cut very short. We're also looking at that transition from 5th to 6th, and also then obviously from 8th to 9th, and we're really going to have a strong focus on algebra, as well as continuing credit recovery for any of our seniors who are still working very, very hard to achieve their plans for graduation. So I look forward to bringing forward a plan to the board for your discussion and review on June the 30th. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Pace. Just waiting on any feedback from the board on your comments. We'll go on to the next item, which is the new business. And I believe that the board was going to consider an appointment to a committee for legislative liaison or some type. Dr. Pace, can you help me here?
Yes, the advisory committee, which was formerly called the Legislative Committee for FSBA, needs your representative by July.
Dr. Pace, that was, I believe that Mr. Weisire was serving in that capacity. Tim? No?
That was me.
That was Mr. Thacker. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Thacker, I'm just going to assume that you want to yield this to someone else, or?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Board, is there any board member that is interested, and participating in this role? Don't everybody jump at once.
I just feel like I was attending some of those meetings too, so I don't know if I was an alternate, but I kept showing up to those meetings also. If that helps.
Do you
Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Weisire.
Thank you. So just for the board's knowledge, first of all, you'll note that when Tanya or Superintendent had mentioned it, they mentioned that it was for advocacy and not legislative anymore. Just understand that at the Florida School Board Association, we transitioned. Clarence, you know this because you were chair of legislative. We've now changed the structure where advocacy is the committee and legislative is a subcommittee. And so what would be happening is you would be moving into the role of the representative to the advocacy committee on behalf of the Osceola School Board, which would then also still cover the legislative initiatives, but advocacy and legislative are really two separate pieces and parts. Advocacy, in the way that we think about it, the state association is about advocating for and on behalf of education in the state of Florida. Legislative, of course, speaks for itself, where it's working on and developing legislative priorities. So whichever board member takes that, just understand exactly what you're doing and what you're stepping into, because this is the first year of that structure change.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Weisire, and for clarifying. Ms. Castillo, you have the floor.
Yeah. So with regards to meetings, Mr. Weisire, do you know if these would still be regular meetings over the phone, or if there's a change of venue?
Sure. What'll happen is the committee will meet once every 3 days all year long for 6 hours at each meeting. Ready? She's not even smiling. Yes, they would still be the same. They would be hosted telephonically or via WebEx or whatever platform is being utilized. And then there would be some in-person meetings. Historically, this committee and the work that it would take on would meet in person during the conferences, which are traditionally held in Tampa. And then they would also have at least one off-site meeting, typically hosted in the county of the president or the chair of advocacy at this point. But for the most part, they would all be held electronically.
Thank you.
So does that mean you're in?
I mean, I've always been in. I just didn't want to nominate myself. I don't want to.
I'll nominate you. That's, I figured.
Yes, look at it, Clarence. Second. So,
Who else wants to?
Well, let's be honest. We have two options here. In fact,
Right.
Chairman.
I know. All right. We have enough there. Congratulations on your new role. I think you will do excellent. And of course, Mr. Weisire, Mr. Thacker, Proof, and myself, we're always going to be for whatever support you need. I'm available. And for sure, Mr. Thacker, I have not served in that role, so I'm certain that some of the other board members will do a much better job. But of course, anything that you need from me, I'm only a phone call. So that does conclude our new business. If I may go on to final board member comments. I'll just go by district. Ms. Castillo.
No, thank you. I'm good.
Yeah, I passed too. I think we discussed enough today. Mr. Weisire.
Fine.
Yeah, Mr. Weisire. Mr. Thacker.
Pass.
Mr. Booth,
Hard pass.
hard pass. All right, man. Okay, so with that said, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Everyone take care and I'll see you soon.